Welcome, everybody. We're so thankful that you are here and have joined us today. It looks like we've got about 52 people joining, and that number is increasing. So that's great to have this many people join us. This is going to be recorded, so just so you all are aware of that, it will be available later at a later time. I also want to just draw your attention to the chat feature. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, I encourage you to use that chat feature to send those questions. I will be keeping track of those as we go throughout the presentation, and there'll be a little bit of question and answer time at the end so that we can get those addressed for you. So welcome. My name is Ricky Barton. I'm the Director of Prevention Services with Community Partnership of the Ozarks, but my connection here is that I serve with the Stand Against Trafficking Coalition, here based in Springfield, Missouri. We are a coalition that has been around since 2012, and our main focus is to educate and raise awareness about human trafficking and eradicate it here in the Ozarks. We do that through multiple presentations and trainings that we offer, whether that's to hotel staff, airport staff, taxi and bus drivers, tattoo parlors, community events, as well as different school education and training for school staff and students and service providers in our community. Additionally, we provide a lot of different media campaigns and print materials that we have. I even have some sitting here with me that if you ever want some print materials to put out at your agency or location, Stand Against Trafficking has those as well for you. So we are thrilled to have Russ Tuttle here with us today. He is a friend of Stand Against Trafficking. He's about 2.5 hours away from us, but we are in communication with him often with his expertise and knowledge. So you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from him. I'll just introduce him briefly here and get straight to his presentation. Russ is the president and founder of the Stop Trafficking Project. He's also the director of Be Alert, which is the Student and Adult Awareness and Prevention Strategy. He's an active member of the Platte County Health Department Human Trafficking Task Force, as well as the Missouri Attorney General's Office Human Trafficking Task Force member. So I want to welcome Russ. Thank you so much for delivering this timely message, and we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Well, thank you, Ricky. I am a big fan of Stand and grateful for all the heroic work you all do every single day. And so thank you for the opportunity. So for all of you who are joining today, via this online seminar, first of all, thank you for joining. If you're like me, you might have burnout on Zoom presentations and WebEx and webinars. And so I'm going to do my very best for the next 90 minutes or so to make this as enjoyable for you as possible while addressing like the deepest, darkest topic possible. And my goal is to help you hopefully become aware of signs to pay attention to, with particularly our focus as an organization, the Stop Trafficking Project, was domestic matter sex trafficking victims, and to hopefully give you some tools to help you be aware, especially about the role that social media plays. Because what we have found since we launched our Be Alert strategy is that when we work with victimized students, 100% of the students that we work with, their victimization has started online. And so the online process is really, really important. And then to hopefully give you a little bit of understanding of how you can personally do some things to prevent this and become aware, especially of local resources, particularly through Stand, since most of you are probably logging in from the Ozarks. So our vision is to give you an image to help you understand how you can address this. So when I tell people I'm going to give you an image to help you understand how we're going to combat sex trafficking, usually like, oh no, so here's the image. So I don't want to freak you out, because a lot of times I'll tell people I'm going to give you a picture, a literal image to help you understand sex trafficking, and people automatically go to really weird places. This is the image I want you to understand, because the presentation title today is there's more here than meets the eye. And so I don't know if anything strikes you as odd about this particular image right here, but this could be any farm door anywhere in Kansas. Half the door is glass. And so if you came to the door and you stood there and your friend comes to the door and goes, oh, hey, I wonder who's at the door. I'm looking through a peephole. When half the door is glass, it's like, what are you doing? You're crazy. Well, I want this to be an image that lasts as a foundational image throughout the presentation, because all of us, regardless of how long we've been involved in this effort to combat domestic matter sex trafficking, maybe you're on here and this is the first time you're experiencing this topic, all of us have somewhat of a limited perspective. And my goal today is to open the window a little bit more, to give us a little bit bigger perspective and help us understand it. So we'll refer back to this image several times. I'm gonna take you down a path that you're probably gonna go, what is this guy talking about? What does this even have to do with anything? And I promise you it's gonna come back to opening our eyes away from this limited perspective to big picture perspective. And so we're gonna talk about this issue of socially acceptable addictions that we have in our society today here in America. So we're gonna talk about some things very, very quickly. I'm not gonna camp here very long, but listen, the gaming industry has now become so fantastical. It's a real word, you can look it up, that our kids today are struggling with reality. So our kids can sit in online classes and their teachers are trying to educate them. Some of our kids in the state may be going to school in person. Some of them may be in a hybrid situation, but a lot of kids, while they're in school, they're on their devices playing games. And what's happening is there's now a little bit of a loss of empathy among many of our kids because of the fantastical nature of our gaming industry. I want you to understand that some of the gaming industry is now being used to allow predators and perverts and pimps to entice our kids. So this guy was arrested for enticing a number of little boys that he originally recruited through Fortnite and then encouraged them to get off of Fortnite onto another social media app where he could communicate with them and really get to know them better. I'm not going to beat this to death. Technology is absolutely an important part of our lives. And I want you to hear something. As an organization, we are not against technology. Listen to me. Technology itself is not necessarily the enemy, but technology is creating tremendous complexities in the lives of our families and our friends and our kids and our churches and our schools. And it's something we have to be honest about. So we can have a love-hate relationship with our technology. Technology is benefiting all of us today. We can communicate for this presentation. If it wasn't for technology due to COVID, we can't be together. So the 110 plus people who are online for this right now, we wouldn't be able to do this without technology. So technology is not always bad. However, I do need you to understand that one of the socially acceptable addictions that we have to talk about, and that we do talk about even in our school presentations with students, is the issue of pornography, because pornography has become a socially acceptable addiction. Back in 2016, I started paying particular attention to Pornhub. And so I'm just going to go back and give you some statistical analysis. So when I say I paid attention to Pornhub, it doesn't mean we were viewing their content. That is completely inappropriate. But we were paying attention to their analysis of their own data. So in 2018, they admitted, by their year-end review, that they had 33.5 billion visits to Pornhub, and by far the United States outweighed any other country in traffic. We go to 2019, they went from 33.5 to up to 42 billion in 2019. The United States was still the lead country by traffic, and the searches that define the primary searches of pornography in 2019 by their own analytics was #1, amateur. This is an important thing to understand because of the role that a lot of self-produced pornography is now playing. And it's very important for us to understand in the context of sex trafficking of children that a lot of our kids are taking naked pictures of themselves and it's online. I want you to look at #4, Belle Delphine. Kind of lock that in the back of your mind. I'm kind of feeding you out of a fire hose today in this presentation, but we're going to come back and talk about Belle Delphine a little bit and help you understand the role that all this plays and how easy it is for our kids to get sucked into it. Now, you may think, oh, well, pornography is an issue for guys. It definitely is. Big window perspective. Globally, Pornhub's users, 32% make up their users. 76% of all Pornhub pornography through all their platforms is viewed through a cell phone. Here's something I deal with all the time. I'll talk to parents all the time. They'll say, I got to get my kid a cell phone to do what? To keep them safer. Big window perspective is helping us understand this reality that, do I really want my kid to have a cell phone? I'm not against kids having cell phones, but I do want us to keep in perspective that there's more here than meets the eye. 76% of all pornography is viewed through cell phone, and a lot of organizations now openly say, as does the National Center of Sexual Exploitation, that a lot of times now around the average age of first-time exposure to pornography is around the age of 8, between the ages of 8 and 11. Do we really want to be exposing our kids to this kind of content? Welcome COVID, and as it relates to Pornhub, they actually began to put out advertisements using the curve, flatten the curve, and so they were offering free premium services on a global nature through Pornhub because of people staying home. one of the things that came out for that was how Pornhub is being used to exploit kids without their permission. And so that led to, just brief history, several organizations, in particular Exodus Cry, led a global movement to where over 2 million people signed petitions to try to shut down Pornhub. Now, here's what's interesting. This is the last statistical update regarding COVID-19 that Pornhub published. Pornhub, typically the first week of every year, puts out all of their year in review material. There's very little information available right now due to Pornhub not posting their material. They used to brag about it, put it all out there. Now they're not putting much out. This on your screen is the last statistical update that they posted, clear back in June 18th. What's interesting about that is around this time, a lot of traction began to start with those people signing up to try to actually shut them down. So they haven't provided year-end review statistics. In fact, their last actual real update was on November 6th regarding election day that had been on November 3rd. I have that graphic. I'm not posting it in a public online recorded presentation because the graphic is actually just, it's too graphic to post for presentations. What they have said is this, and they posted this on December 14th, after nearly over 2 million petitions were signed to try to shut them down. They've made this announcement to where they got rid of millions upon millions of videos with this promise, and it's quoted there. In 2021, Pornhub will release a transparency report detailing the content moderation results from 2020. This will identify not just the full number of reports filed with National Center of Missing Exploited Children, but also other key details related to the trust and safety of the platform. Today's January 21st, there has been nothing released yet. This is their latest release. There's no date as to when they've said it, but I just want you to keep in mind that when I went back to 2018, we were at 32 some billion, then 42 billion in 2019. Now they're saying over 100 billion views per year. That's their statistics. So, okay, so what does all this have to do? We're talking about technology. We're talking about phones. We're talking about all different forms of technology. What do all these socially acceptable addictions have? Gaming industry, pornography. Well, they all create a dopamine release in the brain. So every one of these things has the potential to be chemically addictive if it's misused. This is critically important for you to understand in the context of domestic minor sex trafficking. Because here's what I get all the time. These kids these days, I can't believe what these kids these days are doing. Big window perspective is this. Every single one of these socially acceptable addictions we just talked about, these are created by adults. So I want you to let that sink in, and let's not beat up our kids. Big window perspective, let's understand what's going on. All right, human trafficking. This is your official United Nations definition of human trafficking. It would take multiple hours to unpack this slide. I'm gonna park here very, very quickly. There are 27 major categories of human trafficking on a global scale. They include things like child soldiers. It includes things like forced labor. It also includes the context we're going to be discussing today, which is domestic minor sex trafficking. What I want you to understand is all of the complexity, what you see on your screen, I'm not even going to take time to unpack it for you. It can always be broken down to 3 words. And this is the focus of our presentation today. I want you to remember this image. There's always more here than meets the eye. What do I need to understand? And it's always about these 3 words. It's always about the exploitation of a vulnerability. This is important for us to land on. There's nothing I can do about this. Absolutely, there actually is. Big window perspective. Because anything and everything that we can do to identify the vulnerability in the kids that we care about before that vulnerability can be exploited is actually doing something to help us end it before it begins. We need to understand that. So by definition, we're going to talk today about domestic minor sex trafficking, which is a form of sexual exploitation, which specifically relates to kids who are minors under the age of 18 who are U.S. citizens or a lawfully permanent resident. And it's really critically important that when we're talking about this, that any form of consent that 14-year-old, that 9-year-old, that 6-year-old, that 16-year-old, whatever it is, any form of consent, whether given or implied, it is not relevant in the context of this discussion. This is important because it now allows us to treat domestic minor sex trafficking victims as victims first and not as criminals as it used to be. It would be wonderful now to see this law also apply to our kids the moment after they turn 18. Because once they turn 18, now they are a criminal first. I want you to understand within the context of the exploitation of vulnerability that we're always discussing the 3 other risk factors. There's always that societal and that environmental and that individual risk factor. So when you're trying to figure out what kind of kids are vulnerable, we know that kids who are runners in the foster care system, for example, their vulnerabilities go much higher. Kids who have suffered some form of physical or sexual abuse in the past, their vulnerabilities go up higher. There's a lot of societal and environmental and individual risk factors, but let me give you some insight and understanding of what we have found. What doesn't matter is if you're in the urban core or in the suburbs or in a rural community. What we have found is that there's one common denominator, and the common denominator is a kid's life online. So it doesn't matter if we go to school assemblies in an urban part of a large city, or if we're in suburbs, or if we're in rural communities. What we find is this: we find the adults believe some myths. In the urban core, my kid is way too street smart to fall for this stuff. Wrong. In the suburbs, well, we have money and wealth and power and influence out here, so this can't impact my kid. Wrong. Shocking news, most of Missouri is rural. I know, shocking news. I hear this all the time in rural communities. You know, we leave the black lab in the back of the pickup truck for 9 hours. He'll be there when we get back. We hardly lock the doors. Guess what's happening? Our kids are carrying that mentality online. We're safe out here, no big deal. Wrong. So I want to open you up and give you some understanding into that. Now, why do we have to deal with this? Because it's a demand-driven business. So just really quickly, in 2009, there was a sting operation in the northern part of Kansas City, Missouri. They ran decoy ads that made it very clear they were selling young girls for sex. There was no doubting there was young girls being sold. They had 500 phone calls in the first 24 hours. You may or may not be aware of this, but Children's Mercy Hospital now is ranked in the top 5% of the entire United States in the volume of sexual assault victims they see every single year. That is comparing us to large cities around the nation. And the sexual assault nurses see 1 to 2 acute sexual assault victims every single day. That means the assault happened in 5 days or less. So as Heidi Olson, program coordinator for Children's Mercy Hospital's sexual assault St. Pete program, says that this is the tip of the iceberg. So what's happening? So an Arizona State University conducted a study in 15 states across America. This goes back to 2013. And Kansas City, Missouri was one of those cities. Here's what they found. They ran very detailed online advertisements, and they found this. They were able to do all kinds of analytics to where they could even track it down. Did you send a message from your iPad, or was it a cell phone? Were you calling? Were you texting? Bottom line is this: they found 14.5% of the male population over the age of 18 was online, not viewing pornography, looking to purchase sex. That number represents over 106,000 people. I'm not really sure this is a problem for kids. Are kids really in danger? So big one of perspective is if we understand it's driven by demand, we have to admit demand is high. Where are kids most vulnerable? We're going to talk about apps. We're going to talk about social media. I was recently in a school assembly at 11 girls, juniors and seniors in high school. They approached me with a little bit of pushback to the assembly, and they wanted me to know that they felt really empowered because they were taking their clothes off, sending full naked pictures of themselves to men online, but they were using Snapchat, so they were snapping naked pictures because they felt a level of confidence that we feel empowered to kind of put ourselves out there, and besides, they disappear. Within about 15 minutes, 9 of the 11 girls, I did just kind of gently ask them some questions, were weeping, because now what began to come out was levels of body shaming. Now the images that they thought were going to disappear quickly online actually have been seen by hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people. Now they were getting messages from people they didn't really know who they were, asking for more nefarious content. You need to know something right now, that porn bots are very active. I just got a phone call a couple days ago from a mom in the Kansas City area whose 12-year-old daughter was getting text messages like this. Text messages like this, the porn bots are responding to kids all over the state of Missouri and the state of Kansas. And the goal is they will hopefully get someone to text them back or click on a link. And so I want to set your mind at ease that we've not found that these are actually sex traffickers. Okay, these are porn bots. So the same way that you get your robocalls, porn bots are active in sending this material as well. But what it's doing is it's normalizing this kind of activity, and it's making parents feel like there's nothing they can do. This parent I talked to a few days ago, they decided they were actually going to change the phone number for their kid who received it. Omegle is an app that's a video chat app, and recently there was an 11-year-old girl who was the adult in her family came downstairs, saw her completely naked sitting in her recliner. She was on Omegle, and on the other end was an adult male telling the little girl what to do with a spoon. Welcome to Omegle. Kick Messenger, my personal experience with this happened in a cyber crimes training a couple of years ago. I became a 12-year-old girl online, and I was given an identity and a new Gmail address, and I entered several different social media accounts to learn with cybercrime detectives they're guiding, and Kick Messenger was one of them. I created my account as a 12-year-old girl. There was no geographical location where I lived. There was no fake picture of anything. It was just simply an email address, and I'm a 12-year-old girl. It took 7 seconds, and I got my first message saying, "What you doing?" I didn't respond. 17 seconds later, "What you doing?" "I'm bored." I still didn't respond. 21 seconds later, 3 sentences of sexual vulgarity, pure filth, of what this person wanted to do to me sexually as a 12-year-old girl with images attached that we did not open. I want to give you one of the tips right now for those of you who have kids and you're thinking through, okay, I think I want my kid to have this app, but I'm not really sure. Big one of perspective, if you decide to let your kid get onto social media, make sure you sit with them in the initial moments when you first create that app, because a lot of these apps, the moment your kid creates it, or any one of us, you are instantly public, and you have to work pretty hard to make that private. Just a little tip for you. Ask.fm. I want you to think through a site like Ask.fm for a tween or a teen who is going through body changes and wondering about things of life, but think that through with the context of this. There's 3 words I need you to remember. 3 words are the exploitation of vulnerability. And view it through, there's more here than meets the eye. Is this really something I want my kid to participate in? Tinder is an adult dating hookup app. It's not even a dating app anymore. It's basically a hookup app. So imagine when I got done with a school presentation for young elementary. So in our program, the Be Alert strategy, we come into communities, we educate and empower adults first, and then we go do school assemblies the next day, and we tell kids they need to be going to trusted adults, and here are the trusted adults in your community. We've just educated, empowered, and trained them the night before or the day before. And then we have age-appropriate presentations from kindergarten clear through 12th grade. So this is a young elementary age presentation where we don't even talk about sex trafficking. We don't even talk about pimps. But a 2nd grade girl walks up and unpacks her story and informs me that there are 17 adult men that she's talking to on her Tinder account, and she had her phone with her there in school and showed it to me. Down is a dating app connected to Facebook. You're creating a normalcy for a sexual hookup in our culture. Scout is a flirting app just used literally to meet new people. Now, as you're going through the presentation, you're probably starting to freak out about some apps if this is kind of new to you. So just to kind of a quick timeout to give you a little bit of a deep breath here. All these apps and more are listed in free resources on our website. They're all there for you for free. So don't feel like you have to be screenshotting everything and frantically taking notes, giving yourself carpal tunnel right now, or taking your picture. You can use your phone, you can do all that. It's being recorded, you can watch it later, but this information's out there, and we're happy to make it available to you. But imagine within the context of the exploitation of vulnerability, Scout is a flirting app literally designed to help you meet new people. Or Meet Me, the app that literally uses GPS to help you meet people who live nearby. Blender is a flirting app. So this kind of started the whole, I'm rating you, you're hot or you're not hot based on your picture you sent. Apps that are like it are 3Ender. So 3Ender is an app for, hear me, couples looking for a young third. Grindr is very popular within the LGBTQ plus community. So the boys that I talked to you about the start of the presentation who were on Fortnite, and the guy recruited them off that site, he recruited them onto the Grindr app, where he could then begin to exploit them further. Chat Roulette, this is a video site, randomly matches you up with someone from around the globe. A couple years ago, we had a young girl who bought a $1,800 wedding dress because she was going to marry an Egyptian prince that she met on Chat Roulette. So the Monkey app allows kids to have fun chats. You get to connect with them. You like what you're talking with just some random person. You get to connect with them some more. Think that through in the context of the exploitation of vulnerability. So our friend here uses this app, and here's YouTube. Well, YouTube, what do we have to talk about YouTube for? It's supposed to be really safe. This girl connected with the guy. We're protecting her identity, not promoting him. A famous YouTuber. He would rate kids. He would say, rate how hot I am. And then if you got chosen, he would rate how hot you are. So here's our 13-year-old girl, desperate for attention probably. So there's all these different vulnerabilities in our child. But she's thinking, I know what I'm doing. I'm 13 years old. Critically important that we, in appropriate ways, help our kids understand big window perspective. I can tell you this, when we tell kids the truth, from our experience, over 54,000 students now, is that they respond. So tragically, what she's not paying attention to is that her 59-second video has been viewed 358,830 times, but she's just wanting to innocently connect with this guy. I have to talk about TikTok. It's everywhere. If you haven't heard about TikTok, used to be known as Musical.ly. It's one of the fastest growing social networks, owned by China. So there was a reason why last year the United States government banned any military personnel from having it. There's a lot of controversy happening right now, who owns it, who doesn't own it. But let me give you a just brief update on just what's happened with TikTok just in the last couple of weeks. So they're working on developing another version for under 13 in consultation with Common Sense Network, which is a part of Common Sense Media. There's a version for TikTok for kids 13 to 15, and the biggest change that they made there is that they have auto set it if you are 13 to 15 to where it is a private setting. So TikTok used to be, didn't matter if you were 5 years old, you create a TikTok account, you are immediately available to approximately 2.6 billion viewers. They've got access to your kid. One of the other changes now is that if you're under 16, you are no longer able to post what they call duet or stitch videos, which that is where you take part of someone else's video on the site and you create it into your own. You just think that through, the exploitation of vulnerability, taking someone else's content, creating it your own. And listen, TikTok is filled with nefarious content, nudity, and all kinds of crazy stuff. One of the other changes for the 13 to 15-year-old crowd is that comments are automatically set to friends or no one who can comment. When you get to 16 to 17, the biggest change they made was that the default setting for them is that those duet or stitch videos can only be shared to friends only. Now, here's the challenge, and here's the problem. All of what I just told you can easily be turned off. And most kids turn it off. So let me give you some insight. Jessie's 7 years old. She's at home. She wants to get online. She's from a family that we are locked down, safe, secure. Dad's home, mom is home. Mom agrees to let little Jessie use her cell phone for 15 minutes. Remember, mom and dad are home. Jessie's sitting at the kitchen table where mom is close by. Here's what happened to Jessie. Jessie gets in and logs on. You see this person over there. He says hi. She says hi. How are you? Good. How are you? I'm fine. Good. How old are you? He asks. 7. How old are you? 9. Cool. Send me your photos. Just that quick. So Jessie says, okay. Takes a headshot. Looking nice. Send me your pics without t-shirt. She takes another headshot. Make some pictures without t-shirt. I like to see your body without t-shirt. You can almost hear the innocence in little Jessie's voice as she types these 2 words. I can't. You can't make some new pics in bathroom clothes. My mom said I can't. Don't tell to anyone. Okay, it's secret between us only. One of the emphasis in our young elementary presentations is secrets versus surprises. We continue on, and it's now 3:39, and you read this. Jessie's dad came in the room and said, took over that phone and then says, I'm her father and I'm a police officer. We've documented your IP address and location. I recommend you refrain from any other content. Listen to me. If it can happen to that family, not my kid, not my family, if it can happen to a family where mom's home and dad's a police officer that quickly, there's no one anywhere that should say it can't happen to me. Here's the reality. This is what I'm asked all the time. What apps should I really be careful about? What do I need to know? What this, what that, what that? Listen, if it's electronic and it's got a messaging feature, kids can be groomed or exploited. You need to know that. You need to be honest about that and understand that. Now, 6th grade teacher asked her students, what don't your parents and other adults know about your online life? This is 6th grade students, very honest responses. They talk about nudity. I want you to know something. Even good kids have fake accounts. They talk about it openly. They talk about their fake account being a place where they can express their opinions and their frustration. Suicide is something kids are talking about a lot online. They tell you here again, my secret account. I also have internet friends. COVID-19 has exacerbated this to tremendous levels. Pre-COVID, we were heading into a trend where for a lot of kids, it was almost more important for them to have a lot of likes and a lot of shares and a lot of friends online. That almost became more important than friends in real life. This is the problem. And this isn't out of what are these kids these days. We as adults, big one of perspective, we have to step in and help our kids understand that they need relationships with trusted adults in person and other friends online. That's not the priority. Those friends online is not priority. It may be good to stay in touch with grandma, grandpa, and other friends during COVID. We can't go visit them. But how are we going to, during COVID, help our friends connect, help our kids connect? Because what's happening online is they're targets. And we have to be honest about that. Who's targeting them? I'm not going to glorify these. You need to know that it's increasingly active. There are people that we would call guerrilla traffickers. They're violent. It's a lot of times part of organized crime. They don't care about people. But then we've got, like this lady, she's a mom herself. She seems pretty trustworthy. She's got her own child while she's got 50 victims. We have to pay attention to the fact that some families are selling their own kids. The familial trafficking that's happening, it's real. It's happening. We've got trends where young teenagers are selling even younger kids. It's a trend. It's happening. Let me give you a little bit of profile about Mark Howard. He's 32 years old. On average, he's always got around 10 girls. Average age about 14 years old. So this is Mark. He's got kind of those sleepy bedroom eyes, and so he's kind of nicknamed Mr. Lay-Low. So one of the things you need to know about is once kids get into deeper levels of trafficking, a lot of times they will be branded. It's something to look for. A tattoo that looks different. I'm going to unpack a lot of different tattoos for you later in the presentation. But Mark was branding his kids Lay-Low or Mrs. Lay-Low because that was his street name. Now, this is not my house. These are not my vehicles, not my cash and weapons, not the clothes. This is a very lucrative business. Why is this so lucrative? So on the screen right now are just some names and some ages and some occupations. And what I want you to understand as I scroll through these pictures, these are all people who have been arrested. And this is your look at demand. Because a lot of times we get really angry at that guerrilla trafficker or that online predator or that pervert or that person who's harming kids. And I want you to look at the faces of demand. And I don't want to glorify this, but I want to give you a reality check, big one of perspective, that even a 25-year-old police officer or a president of a university, these people that you would look probably pass them in the grocery store. They might even attend a school function where your kids might be. This is the reality we have to pay attention to. And it's not, oh my word, I got to be scared of every person who's out there with my kid. But it is a wake-up call to go, there's more here than meets the eye. And what we have to pay attention to is big window perspective, the manipulation factors that our kids are experiencing. You see, in our organization, we realized years ago, it's not enough just to educate and empower adults about this and not give kids any information. And it's also not enough to just go into schools or churches and tell kids about this without empowering adults to do something. It has to be both and. So one of the critical things we have to understand is it's about 3 words. It's about the exploitation of vulnerability. And the vulnerabilities, yes, the foster kid runner, the kid who's been sexually assaulted, kids struggling with their sexual identity, all these things raise up the vulnerability. But all of our kids are dealing with some real stuff to where they feel like no one understands me. And if they feel like no one understands me and there's not a trusted adult they can talk to, guess what happens? They take it online.
I wanted you to stay after because I wanted to talk to you.
How did you misspell that word?
I wish you could be more like your sister. I've gone from an A to a D in this class.
Ask your mother.
Go ask your father. He's better than us.
You're not wearing that out of this house.
I know what you mean. My parents don't understand me either.
Do you have any idea how many calories are in that
You
cupcake?
really think you can play that sport? You're not athletic.
You look like a slob when you dress like that.
I need you to focus more on my class, like you used to.
I can see your belly.
You really need to give that up. You sound horrible.
Have you been talking to that guy you met online?
You are way too young to me.
He seems super nice. What's wrong? How old is he? Did I go home?
Not right now.
What kind of picture did you send him?
When's the last time you did see her?
Yesterday morning, before she left for school.
About 7:30. Look, it's been over 24 hours. Where is she? Have you heard anything?
This is an image that we pulled off of a known trafficking site.
It's not my little girl.
I'm afraid that it is, sir. This is a site where men go looking for young girls.
She's 12. She never even had a boyfriend. What kind of animal would go looking for my little girl?
So the question, what kind of animal goes looking for our little kids? So we briefly give you a little insight into that, the kind of people that will sell kids, the kind of people that will buy kids. What I want to focus on is what are we going to do for our kids? And I want you to understand, if you really want to be serious about ending it before it begins, yes, we absolutely have to understand that kids in foster care and runners and kids who've been harmed, sexually abused, and all the different societal things that will raise a vulnerable kid. I want us to get away from thinking that it's only the homeless or the kid in poverty who can be susceptible to this. That's a myth. Big one to perspective is if you got a kid on your hand who's lonely and they decide they're going to go online because no one understands me, especially the adults in my life, guess what's going to happen? There's somebody there online waiting for them. And I want you to know something. This current generation is the most connected generation ever, and it's one of the loneliest. Our kids are feeling so isolated. COVID has really brought out the challenges in this. We're talking about kids with extra depression. So you take that vicious cocktail, you got a lonely kid who feels isolated and now they're depressed and they're spending all this time online. We talked earlier, all that time online, there's the dopamine release in the brain to where that kid who's been on there, whatever the game is, for 8 hours, and you pull them off and they're angry, they want to punch a hole in the wall. What's happening? They're not bad kids. Please understand, they're not bad kids. You're dealing with a vulnerability in them that we had better identify, big window perspective to go, what's the vulnerability here? I got to make sure it doesn't get exploited. The level of our kids in depression is leading to massively increased suicide ideation and actual dying by suicide. Earlier this year, I got done with a school assembly, and it was one of those assemblies where I was there for a long time, hour and a half, 2 hours after the assembly. Kids were lined up coming to talk to me, and they were sending them onto the counselor's offices and others in the area who could help. And honestly, I was getting pretty worn out. And this girl walks up to me and says, Mr. Tuttle, do you like my sweatshirt? And I was like, oh, finally, a quick reprieve from all the horror stories. And I said, yeah, I really like your sweatshirt a lot. It's a really cool hoodie. And then with no expression on her face whatsoever, she says this, looks at me and I says, my best friend in the world just gave this to me, but she's dead. She died by suicide. We've already buried her. After her funeral, this sweatshirt arrived in the mail from her with a letter that she had written to me. This girl begins to unpack how she had a best friend who met a guy online. Her friend didn't know anything about it. But come to find out in this letter, this girl valued my new friend now who's standing in front of me so much that she wanted her to know what had happened. And so she unpacks in this letter how she'd met this guy online, thought he was her age. Turns out he was an adult male. This girl had been given some pornography online by this guy. Thought wouldn't it be really hot if we did some of this stuff together. So when he asked, she was ready, and she sent him the naked hot pictures that he wanted. When he asked, she was ready to meet him in person. You see, it was about the exploitation of all these vulnerabilities that are now coming to a perfect storm for her. She writes to my friend in the letter of the horrific things that happened to her when she met this guy in person, and how then he had recorded what he had done to her and was now putting her online, and others were lining up to purchase her. Remember, it's a demand-driven business. Now she's stuck. She's got no one to talk to. This is why one of the primary messages for kids is you've got to talk to trusted adults. When we take our strategy in the communities around Missouri and Kansas, the adults understand this and the kids line up to talk because they want to be told the truth. This girl now is hugging her arms like she's trying to be close to her friend. She's hugging the sweatshirt that's just come from her friend, and her friend tells her that, I care about you, I know you like this sweatshirt, I want to mail it to you, and unpacks how she was going to die by suicide and why, and that's how the girl died. And now my new friend is not just in sorrow, but now she's crying, but now there's fear, because then the girl says this to me. She says, Mr. Tuttle, my friend wrote this to me in the letter. I hope you don't mind, but I've given your name to the people online as another girl who's probably willing to take her clothes off too. You see, there was this level of cyberbullying that the girl who died by suicide got sucked into, but she didn't have any trusted adults to go to. Our concern today is, what can we do? How can we keep our kids safe? Well, we've got to be involved in the lives of our kids. We can't just rely on the technology that we can put on technology to keep us safer from technology. We'll talk about some of that in a little bit. There are apps out there you can use to keep kids safer, but that's not enough. We have to be a soft landing spot for our kids, because guess what's happening? Do you think the little second grade girl I told you about earlier who had a Tinder account with 17 adult men she's communicating with, and they knew she was in second grade and the content was sexual, guy, I'm telling you, it was horrific stuff. Do you think she could even like spell controlling relationships, let alone understand, really comprehend what was happening to her online, all the different things happening to her? See, I want to remind you, there's always more here than meets the eye when our kids are online, and it's about the exploitation of vulnerability. And if we're going to end it before it begins, we've got to identify those vulnerabilities, whatever it may be, in that kid, and end it before they can be exploited. We feel really bad for all of our girls that this is happening to. Oh, I do too, but it's happening to guys too. Big window. Earlier this year, I got done with the school assembly, and a young guy walked up to me, 16 years old, stud kid, 6'2", 185 pounds, walks up to me, tear in his eye. I want you to know that this happens to guys too. He began to unpack his story. Well, what happened? He'd been introduced to pornography earlier in life, and it had become an addiction. And so when, in his words, a smoking hot 21-year-old naked woman sent him naked pictures and said, I showed you mine, show me yours, he was ready to respond. I quickly said, dude, time out. Are you sure that you've been communicating with a female? Because the pattern is a lot of men are sending young boys naked pictures of females and then enticing them. And the boy, whether it's through the gaming system or whatever, they'll eventually try to get that boy to meet them in person. And then they find out that it's actually a guy I've been communicating with. And my 16-year-old friend says, no. He says, I know it was a female and it was really her, because we actually met in person twice and we hooked up, as he said in teenage vernacular. As I'm standing in that auditorium talking to a 16-year-old, now my mind is going where I've got a 21-year-old female who has raped a 16-year-old boy, and I'm thinking through my next steps as I'm talking to this young man, how I'm going to help him, because now we have a definite legal law enforcement issue going on here with all kinds of complexities. But then he says this, he says, Mr. Tuttle, he said, she invited me to a party. The third time I was supposed to meet her, I showed up to the party expecting to meet her, but she wasn't there. It was a house where men were waiting for me. I, Mr. Tuttle, was the intended party. I want you to know that this can happen to boys too. I want you to know this can happen to boys too. So the role of the internet, it's really this easy for our kids to have their vulnerabilities exploited, especially when they're young and go, I know what I'm doing, I'm 13.
Me
girl online is actually pretty easy. You can go into any chat room and just start talking. Most of the girls are usually so insecure and desperate for
Attention from older guys is totally flattering. They're so much more mature and understanding than the guys my age.
Age actually works to my advantage. They like to brag to their friends that they're dating an older guy, so I just play along and pretend I'm really interested.
Interested in the same things I am. You can talk forever and really get to know someone without worrying about looks or whatever. That's the best thing about chatting.
Chatting seems unthreatening to them, so they lower their guard. After a while, I start talking about how we're soulmates and how lucky we are to have found each other.
Other people don't understand. I know what I'm doing. If you really care about each other, there's nothing wrong with me.
Meeting them is the goal. Once I get them out of their house, well, that's when things get really interesting.
So what I want you to understand is, okay, my kid, this kid's driving me crazy. You're not arguing with the kid, you're arguing with their fantasy. This is why I briefly unpacked all the socially acceptable addictions that our kids are launching into. So let's talk about Belle Delphine. Remember, she was the #4 most searched for item in 2019, 42 billion searches. She was #4. Belle Delphine is actually named Mary Belle Kirshner. She's from South Africa. And back in 2016, she started out a YouTube channel, very innocent. She had a lot of people following her. She's there in her braces. She would do all these little fun kind of interactive things. And she got up to 2.5 million followers. And then it took a turn. In 2019, you can see the content here began to become much more sexualized. And here in 2019, you see that you can have 2 minutes of Belle Delphine being a thought. If you don't know what a thought is, it means it's slang for that hoe over there. And typically it's a girl who will sleep with everybody. She's got a new crush every single day on somebody, but she comes across really hard as being this sweet, innocent little girl who is anything but. That's that's the slang of what a thought is. And moved from that to where then Belle Delphine was actually had Patreons. So people would pay money for certain kinds of pictures. And if you notice on this account, she's talking about her NSFW content. If you don't know what that means, it's not safe for work. So you know it's got sexual content. And then there at the bottom, she says, I'm also really into kitten and DDLG play. And if you don't know what DDLG means, it stands for Daddy Dominate Little Girl. There's also DDLB for Daddy Dominate Little Boy, but being a female, she was saying DDLG. I want you to know that this is out there. So our friend, Belle Delphine, has gone from 2016, this innocent little girl embraces, to this. It progresses, keeps getting worse and worse and worse until it gets to this point with Pornhub. She makes this post where she says, if this photo gets 1 million likes, I'll actually make a Pornhub account. The time has officially come. Tag your friends, your dad's friend, tag your friends and your dad to help out. Pornhub responds, this is the best news I've heard all year. 2019, Belle Delphine was the most searched for celebrity in the entire year. That's the progression. I know what I'm doing. Big window perspective. It's all about the exploitation of vulnerability. So, and our kids are hanging out on time. We need you as adults to understand what your kids are doing on social media. They probably don't know exactly who they're talking about. You need to understand that sexting has become the new flirting. When our team goes into elementary schools, it is not uncommon for us to hear stories about sexting, even in elementary school. It's become more common in middle school and incredibly common in high school. They need to understand that this is illegal activity. One of the resources I want you to understand that you have in Missouri is through the Attorney General's Human Trafficking Task Force. Sergeant Dan Nash is just a rock star helping through the Highway State Patrol. He's a sergeant with the Highway State Patrol. And one of the things that the Highway State Patrol is doing is that they are investigating these kinds of cases. Because here's what used to happen all the time just a few years ago, and it would drive me crazy. I would get this all the time. Well, we can't really investigate this because it's two 14-year-olds sharing naked pictures between each other. That is incorrect. In Missouri, the Missouri State Highway Patrol is now doing what they call investigating it backwards. And what they found is about 1/3 of the kids that are engaging this kind of activity, there's some kind of other sexual exploitation or something there, a lot of times with an adult involved or some other level of just nefarious thing that goes to a level of, we've got to investigate this. So I want to make sure you understand that. I'm starting this video here. This is the bark video, where if you haven't seen this before, you need to. I'm probably not going to show the entire 9 minutes of this just for sake of time for our presentation today, because there's other things I want to talk about. But last year, Bark renewed this video talking about how difficult this issue is that we're discussing. And so I want to show you part of it. If it will play. And if it won't play, we'll skip it. Here we go.
I never thought I would be chasing child predators. It was 2 years ago when our team intercepted conversations between a 12-year-old girl and a 40-year-old pedophile. He wasn't just talking to her, he was abusing her, coercing her, collecting images and videos, and no one in her life, her parents, sixth grade teacher, or friends, knew what was happening. I'm the sixth grader of my own. I have 3 kids, actually, but you don't have to be a parent to be devastated by this. I work for a tech company that uses artificial intelligence to detect issues like grooming and sexual predation, and this is something we see constantly. These abuses are occurring quietly and mostly go unreported, and we want parents to know exactly what we know about what happens online. So we made a plan.
A man has been arrested for allegedly raping a 14-year-old
users
that he met
of
over Snapchat.
Instagram has become the #1 social media site.
At the top of the free
We
download
also
bar.
see firsthand the predatory symbiotic relationship that exists between Instagram and Snapchat.
We would create a fictitious 15-year-old girl, complete with a believable social media identity, put her online, and document how long it would take for a predator to approach her. But creating a person out of thin air is complicated. We needed photos, but we knew we couldn't use an actual teenager. It would have to be someone on our team. I'm 37, but our graphic designers assured me that with the wonders of photo manipulation, they could magically make me look over 2 decades younger. We bought clothes and accessories, studied body language and facial expressions, and methodically covered and edited signs of aging, wrinkles, weight shifts, and stretch marks. Meanwhile, we coordinated with federal, state, and local law enforcement. Then we built a story around her, a history, a family, a social circle. Livy was born in 2004 and is a sophomore, recently moved to Indiana. We created multiple online accounts for Livy, prominently displayed her age, and posted typical teen content. We even created virtual friends for Livy who would comment on her posts. With everything in place, we would launch the project, give it a few months, and see if anyone would buy it. So we hit the button, and Livy went live. Within the first hour of posting on Livy's accounts, 7 adult men contacted her. By the end of 9 days, that number was 92. The conversations ranged in severity from making sexual comments to sharing and requesting explicit photos and videos to manipulation and threats. The onslaught was so massive, it took 5 of us playing Livy full-time to keep up. We decided to move off-site where we could scale up the operation and gather as much information and evidence as possible. Since Livy is 15, men might try to falsely justify their actions towards her because of her proximity to adulthood. Would parents question, where's the bar? Would a 13-year-old face the same barrage of predators? A 12-year-old? How young could it possibly go? The graphics team transformed me into 11-year-old Bailey. Bailey is afraid of the dark. She hasn't had her first crush yet. She's still prepubescent. A parent might assume Bailey would be insulated from any sort of predatory attack. We launched our 11-year-old persona online.
444 and go. One link from a guy, his profile photo. Yes.
So let's say 1 minute, 7 seconds. We have a message request.
Although this, sorry, 2 more requests just came in. How much time? 1 minute and 40 seconds?
Yeah. How old are you? You go to the profile, you know that that is a child. It also says in the profile that the child is in 6th grade.
Another one.
It's just lighting up, like the inbox is just boom, 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 boom.
Video call in less than 5 minutes.
I can't see you. Don't be shy.
They all say don't be shy.
Few parents know just how dangerous these platforms are for so many kids. So we brought some on site so they could see for themselves. 11-year-old Bailey's persona was approached with an even more disturbing level of manipulation and requests. While the majority of the abuse happened from a distance, our child profiles also receive requests to meet up in person.
So I'm gonna end the video there. You want to watch the full video? It's available on our website, and honestly, it's easily available anywhere on social media. It's out there everywhere, and it's free for you to find anywhere you can find it. But what happens? The rest of the video, they talk about would someone actually show up in person, and that person did show up in person. They record that, and the thing that they leave us with in this video that Bark put together was this: is that all the technology that we can put, and Bark is one of the ones that we recommend that you put on your phone. So if you've got a kid with the device, we recommend Covenant Eyes and Bark, among others, and we'll talk about that. And again, there's a ton of resources for free on our website that we'll give you a link to at the end. But one of the most important things is that we have to be engaged parents and guardians with our kids because of the loneliness and isolation, depression, suicide ideation, cyberbullying, all the things our kids are experiencing online. And what we have to understand is we have to understand that we must be a soft landing space for our kids, not judgmental. These kids these days can't believe you. What are you doing? I told you not to get on that site. Okay, just end all that, okay? Big window perspective, understand the reality. It's about 3 words. It's about the exploitation of vulnerability. And if you want to end it before it begins, what's the vulnerability in the kid you care about? And what are you going to do about ending that vulnerability? One of the basic things to help your kids understand that we need you as adults to back us up with, which is the message we give to kids, is don't communicate with strangers online. I get this a lot from kids. Yeah, well, we've been chatting for 3 months. I don't feel like they're a stranger anymore. Listen, if you can't look them in the eye and say, I know this person for real, because I have so many kids with tears in their eyes tell me, I thought I knew who that person was. They told me they were this. The picture showed this. Then when I met them, wasn't who they intended to be. So don't meet someone you met online in person. For you and me as adults sitting here right now is like, duh. Listen, our kids, it's not duh. We have to walk them through this. We help kids understand why they shouldn't be taking those hot pics and sending them online. We have to explain to them the dangers of this. And for you as adults, I need you to understand this. It used to be block it and delete it. Pretend like it didn't happen, it'll go away. Incorrect. Block it, save it, report it always. And in the state of Missouri, the Missouri State Highway Patrol has been taking their interdiction for protection of children throughout the state of Missouri, and it continues. There's more and more law enforcement officers throughout the state being trained. There's more and more understanding that this is a reality. Make the call, contact the Attorney General's office, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline number that we'll give you at the end. And what's been happening is through those numbers, people in Missouri have made contacts. I've seen something, I'm saying something, I'm contacting the national hotline number. Those calls are coming back to Missouri State Highway Patrol, and positive things have been happening. If you encounter someone, especially for those because I'm not really sure who I'm talking to, over 110 people, I don't really know who all's on here. So, but for those of you who may be educators or medical professional, or you're a mandated reporter, you know how you must operate. But here's generally speaking how all of us need to deal with this. Believe the child that tells you something. The story may be so far out there. In the moment, I need you to believe them and acknowledge how brave they are. Don't try to fix it for them. Just encourage them. Don't ever promise something that you can't fulfill. Don't ever tell that kid, oh, you'll be fine now. I'm going to keep you safe. You don't know that. You have no clue. Remain focused. Stay under pressure. Don't pressure them to say anything. You stay with a release of pressure on your own self. Go ahead and freak out on the inside, but stay calm and collected on the outside, and make sure you report to law enforcement, especially if it's one of these 9 things. These are criteria that we operate by within our organization. And I was serious before, but now we report. If you ever get any kind of a clue, there's an adult grooming a child for inappropriate relationship at the time, you report. straight to law enforcement. Adult requesting nude pictures from a child online, report it. The minor sent nudes to an adult. The minor was being sextorted. This is being so incredibly common in our schools. Report it. The minor provided nudes to another minor. Oh, wait, we didn't used to do this. Remember, now we're working these investigations backward. Report it. There are plans to meet in person. They've already met in person. They do online video sex. Remember the little girl, 11 years old on Omegle, naked in the chair, guy on the other line telling her what to do with a spoon? Report it. Any thought of any potential trafficking. These are critical things for you to engage with. What are some of those indicators outside of online safety issues we have to pay attention to? You got a kid, and of course the tattoos. You're finding them dressing differently, and this can go a lot of different ways. Maybe that girl who used to dress a little bit provocatively, maybe there's been some things happening. Now she wants no one to notice her. Maybe it's that girl, now all of a sudden she's dressing very sexually split. This is why you have to know the kid. You have to know the vulnerability in that kid and address that vulnerability before it can be exploited. We're doing with these motel room keys, all these condoms, large amounts of cash, that phone that you didn't used to have, how they talk about people, the chronic runaways. That's one of the huge ones, obviously. The STIs, injuries that don't make sense. A lot of times they're burning kids with cigarette butts. A lot of times the burns will be behind the ear or the back of the neck. Maybe there's a broken bone, like a broken pinky or broken toe. Very painful, but not that easily discernible to a member of the public. All these different things are indicators of exploitation. And these are a lot of the tattoos. So when I'm talking about, you see a tattoo on a kid, you know, they went and got, you know, a daisy on their ankle. Oh no, they're being sold for sex. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about these kinds of examples. So this is really common to have like a crown and a king. This one, a sack of money with a very vulgar expression there. So again, you see kind of that pronged crown. This is an example of what's called slave tagging. So imagine now this person is selling this child, and so they have the bravery and the audacity to put this tattoo on a child. You see these kinds of tattoos. This is obviously not normal, needs to be reported. Word is bond and loyalty is life. For our kids who get really deep into the criminal element of domestic minor sex trafficking, to the point to where those guerrilla traffickers are controlling them, the Romeo pimp is now becoming really violent. Word is bond and loyalty is life. That's why they'll look you in the eye as an adult and lie to you and say, I'm not a victim. It's incredible how many of our kids don't realize and understand that they are victims of sex trafficking. We have to understand that. You need to understand this. Our kids are not waiting to be rescued. They're not looking to you as their knight in shining armor. Come rescue me. The kids who are being sold for sexual purposes against their will are in denial of what's happening. There's issues of trauma bonding. There's issues of PTSD that they're going through. Imagine you've got these kind of markings on your physical body. Every time you look in the mirror, you see that. What does that do to your self-esteem? What does that do when that person who is controlling your life beats you in one moment and then turns and tells you the next moment how much they love you, how much they care about you? I want you to let all that sink in through the three words. It's always about the exploitation of a vulnerability. The date stamp there, when I began to own you. The mob is common within criminal elements. By any means necessary. Imagine this poor precious girl. So the National Center of Sexual Exploitation put out this slide, and we use this. The vast majority of even adult women in prostitution experience levels of psychological coercion, physical abuse, and torture that plainly classify them as victims of sex trafficking. And the majority of these women, it starts when they're minors. This is why it is so critically important that we end it before it begins. And in part to do that, we have to understand the role that pornography plays in this. Remember at the start of the presentation, I talked about Pornhub at length. There's a reason for that. We firmly believe that pornography is the engine driving domestic minor sex trafficking, especially 1 in 5 images of a child. Then what naturally happens is teens are viewed as product to be sold. And you may recall some of the statistics I gave you about the demand. Here's the challenge. Technology is amazing. We've covered that. We're not against technology. Technology is not necessarily the enemy in and of itself, but it is creating tremendous complexities in the lives of our families and our kids. We covered that. We're using technology today. Hopefully this has been beneficial to you to this point. But here's what we have to understand. Pornography is rampant on devices. Your kid doesn't have to go to a porn site to see porn. All of those social media apps I mentioned at the start, pornography is readily available. So when we go to schools and we talk to kids and they'll come through, I'm thinking through these 4 C's of addiction. Recently I had a 6th grade boy walk up to me. He hadn't even gone through puberty yet. He walks up head down, ashamed to talk to me. We don't do shame. We don't do shame in our assemblies. I smiled, looked at him, said, buddy, look me in the eye, talk to me, you can tell me anything. His squeaky little voice. He looks up to me in 6th grade. He says, Mr. Tuttle, have you heard of this thing called Pornhub? Yeah, buddy, I've heard of Pornhub. He says, tears coming down his face. I'm addicted. It feels like my brain is on fire. Can you please help? So proud of a 6th grade boy to step forward in bravery and admit and say they need help. Because what's happening is the 4 C's of addiction are leading a lot of our other kids into this reality. When we started this effort years ago, the goal was to keep kids safer. Now, yes, the goal is to keep kids safer, but there's another goal, to keep our kids from becoming predators themselves. You know, it's not because they're bad kids. It's because there's this dopamine release in the brain. There's this chemical addiction to these devices and to the content that they're experiencing. So I've had kids come to me, and a boy recently told me, he was in high school. He said, my fear is that I'm about to do some of the things that I've viewed in pornography that are now an addiction in my life. I'm afraid I'm going to do some of those things to the girls in my life that I'm just friends with, that I actually care about. I'm not sure I can control myself. Huge problem. Super proud of this young boy to step forward. From the clinical perspective, porn is this addictive. It's addictive like any other drug. And what we're finding is that there are kids in school who readily tell me that they're sharing pornography during school hours on Google Classroom. There are kids that tell me they're viewing pornography on their school-issued device in school. We're hearing the stories when they're in lockdown during COVID, how easy it is to access pornography throughout the day. The challenge is this: it begins to rewire the brain to where they become so dependent on it because of the chemical reaction they're having in their brain. Most clinicians will not try to shame a cocaine addict out of their coke addiction. They won't try to shame a meth addict. For too often and for too long, a lot of people want to try to shame someone out of their porn addiction. They have to understand the science of what's happening in the brain. They're not going to have success shaming them. That's a narrow perspective. Big one of perspectives, understand this. It is a vulnerability to be exploited. And the challenge is this. This is where we're finding far too many students. Every one of these words that you see on this screen is a vulnerability that can be exploited. Remember, there's always more here than meets the eye, and it's all about the exploitation of vulnerability. For the kid in your life that you care about, whether it's your own kid, or maybe you're a grandparent, or maybe it's a niece or nephew, maybe it's a kid in school, maybe it's a neighbor kid in soccer team, volleyball, whatever, in your church, know what the vulnerability is in that kid, and then figure out what can I do to keep that from being exploited. Because the challenge that we're finding is this. We feel like then as adults, when you hear a presentation like this is so dark and so horrible, there's nothing I can do. Here's the reality. There actually is hope. And I want to focus on that. When we go and do school assemblies, we've kind of landed on an interesting niche. Part of my background is I lived for about 12 years of my life in the country of India. And I had an experience in India that has now become a very teachable moment to over about 121,000 people. About 54,000 of those are students. And so now you get to hear the story. I was in India, and I was really hot on a street, and I was drinking a cola product called a Thumbs Up because I was out of water. Well, what happened was, as I downed the cola, I ended up with a dead cockroach in my mouth. So this is a really disgusting story that we have a lot of fun unpacking for students in school assemblies. But we also unpack it for adults in a different way. So I'm going to unpack it for you all in a much gentler, kinder way without totally grossing you out. When we tell this to students, we do our best to kind of gross them out because we want to leave them with an image that's going to be lasting. Because here's what we have found. Kids are sick and tired of hearing the same old presentation over and over. All right, students, set your profiles to private. Be safe online. There's predators out there. They're trying to lure you in. Be careful who you're talking to online. You never know who it is. And the feedback we get back from kids is like, shut up. We don't want to hear that. Just forget it. So we feel like we found a little bit of a niche here. And so the story goes like this. So here's the thing about drinking a cola product. Okay, the cola product in India is not as carbonated as a regular Coke, and it was a little bit sweeter. Okay, and it was called a thumbs up. And yes, they spell thumbs incorrectly, but that's the product line. There's nothing wrong with cola. Okay, now we know we should drink nothing but water. But a little bit of cola is okay in moderation. So guess what? We know from the science of it, especially for our younger kids, no screen time at all is best. Just like you should drink nothing but water. But you know what? A little bit of cola in your life, it's okay in moderation. So guess what? Literally the world works like this. Our kids couldn't function in school without electronics. It's the way schools developed. So much of their education now and entertainment has gone online. What we have to go is say, okay, it's okay in moderation. Now we know the science of it. None at all is best, especially up to certain ages as the brain's developing and growing. But here's the reality. Moderation. So the goal is this then. So we teach kids that when you're online in moderation, be really careful because there could be a cockroach there. Now, there's not always going to be a cockroach there, and more often than not, you're going to be able to bypass that, recognize it. But the cockroach represents anything that our little kids that makes them feel unsafe. In our young elementary school assemblies, the cockroach is anything that makes you feel unsafe. Close the lid, unplug it, show it to an adult. That's pictures, that's content. As they get older, we begin to unpack the complexities of domestic minor sex trafficking, how they can be safer from it. The cockroach at that point represents that pervert, that predator, that pimp. So anytime there's a cockroach, it leaves this message. So what we do then is at the end of our presentations, we go into schools and we do the age-appropriate presentations. At the end of our presentations, they take a survey. It's a very short survey, and the survey indicates to us by their own admission, it's a quick check the box, their level of vulnerability. And we're measuring things. Have you met a complete stranger in person you first met online? Are you sending nudes of yourself or sharing nudes? And what's your engagement with pornography? So recently in November, I was in a very small rural community in Missouri, and won't name the community, but a small rural community, small enough to where it takes 4 towns to kind of create one rural community for a school district. And 24% of the 6th graders were vulnerable based on what I just told you, engaging in vulnerable activities. 84% of the juniors. It's a reality check. We take that information and we send it back to the schools, along with other videos and then resources that we can have parents and students interact with together, other resources. We send it back to the schools and go, here's the number of kids in your school that are vulnerable, and here are steps we think you should take next. What begins to happen is communities begin to wrap around their kids and go, oh, my kid actually is vulnerable. There is more here than meets the eye. I have got to be fully engaged. We end our school assemblies after they take those surveys, collect them, and we end the surveys where the kids stand up and now they're going to kind of personalize everything they've just learned in a school assembly. You know, our school assemblies are very high energy, make them laugh, make them cry, make them a little bit angry sometimes, make them question, make them think, but we appeal to the hero in our kids. And so we end by having them stand up and they yell, not in my life, not in my school, not in my future. And then they yell cola cockroach and they make vomit sounds to kind of drive the whole point home that, listen, it's okay to be online in moderation. You can have an online life. We're not against it, but there's a cockroach factor and we need you to be aware of it. So here's an example of a middle school. So an hour after that assembly was done, one of the kids that was in the auditorium came forward and she said, there's a cockroach in my life, essentially, and began to unpack what was happening with her. And the very next day, this guy was arrested in Hoisington, Kansas, in jail, a $1.3 million bond. Because one brave girl came forward, there ended up being a total of 4 cases, which then extended over the next 18 months through that part of Kansas with multiple more kids. So you tell kids the truth, and they will step up. It's about identifying the exploitation of vulnerability, but we don't use that language with kids. We use cola cockroach. So in this Missouri school, there were 4 boys in 7th grade who connected with Sarah online. Sarah wanted the 4 boys to get revenge pictures of another girl in the school. And so they used their iPhones and they took upskirt pictures of the girl in 7th grade and sent them to Sarah. Long story short, for the purposes of this presentation, Sarah actually ended up being the Boy Scout troop leader of the 4 7th grade boys. He's been arrested in jail, but tragically, because of all the complications that I am not at liberty to talk about in this setting, especially since this is being recorded and we're not online. If I was in person, I could tell you more details, but I'm not at liberty to do that, as you can well understand. Tragically, one of those 4 7th grade boys died by suicide because of this situation. Here's a group of 1st, 2nd, 3rd graders. So one of our goals as an organization is to get to the place to where we are engaging with communities throughout the state of Missouri and Kansas to this level of degree that if there's a student who stays in the school district, kindergarten through 12th grade, they will experience one of our presentations 3 times over their school life. 1 time in elementary age, 1 time in junior high, middle school age, or early high school, and the rest of high school. The goal is that every 3 years coming through the same communities to be presenting this, and we are convinced that we will watch the levels of vulnerability begin to drop, especially as we work through the Missouri Attorney General's Human Trafficking Task Force with all the resources available there and our close partnership with the Missouri State Highway Patrol in helping these things happen. If we can start at this age and then keep this next video level of enthusiasm through high school, we feel like we've got a really fighting chance of ending it before it begins. So what can we do as adults to take it beyond this? I want to give you a top 10 suggestions for you as adults, because part of what we want to help you understand is the reality that you can be aware of some certain signs to look for in our kids and know what the role is within that social media plays and what can you do. So the first thing I recommend for you as an adult is don't live in fear, but be wise. And here's what we mean. Don't overreact, but don't underreact either. Oh, it's just a phase, you'll be fine. I'm not going to do anything about it. You're 13 years old, it'll be fine. It's just a phase she's going through. Okay, that's incorrect. That's underreacting. Be careful not to overreact either. Oh my word, my kid's been on that game for 4 hours. They tried to get them off and they punched a hole in the wall and they were talking to somebody I didn't know. Okay, so I'm gonna say rip the Wi-Fi out of the house, take their phone away, and take their gaming system away. Okay, that's quite possibly also an overreaction outside of extreme situations. Understand this, I can't give you the exact answer what to do for your situation, but I need you to understand that you need to not live in fear, but you need to be wise. And if you're a parent with your own kid and you're trying to figure out how to navigate this, then I give you this advice. Be their parent first, not their best friend. Okay, a best friend is going to let the kid walk to the edge of a cliff. And let's let the edge of the cliff represent you can have as much unfiltered time and unsupervised time online as you want. I'm not going to ask you questions. I'm not going to do anything. Don't care. It's all good because we're best friends. Okay. The challenge is if you're that best friend and not a parent, you're not going to build a fence around the top of that cliff, because what's happening is our kids are falling off the cliff and they're being sexually exploited online. They're meeting people online. There are kids who are being groomed and they're becoming victims of sex trafficking because of what they're doing online. And the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff is having to clean up the mess. Be the parent before the best friend. Build those safeguards around the top. And don't ever think or say, not my kid. Can't happen to me, because this is the most common thing we hear. Didn't think it could ever happen to my kid. I thought whatever they thought. Big window perspective. My kid's not homeless. We're not in poverty. Okay, but are your kids lonely? Do they feel isolated? Are they depressed? Pay attention to what's happening in your kids' lives. And can I tell you, as an adult, please lead by example in your own life. Here's what a challenge is. let's just call it, generally speaking, don't hold me to these exact ages, but let's call it like 35 and over, maybe 40. You've got your life in real life, and then you kind of dabble with your life online. There's a generation where it's just all one. See, this is why a kid will be talking to someone who's 6 feet away, and pre-COVID, where they don't have to be 6 feet away, but instead of actually talking to them out loud, they're like using some social media app and their thumbs are flying. It's a form of communicating. And every little thing they do is documented online. Here I'm at the mall, click, click. Here I'm eating pizza, click, click. All the selfies, they're one and the same. So I want you to lead by example in your own life, so adults put the phone down long enough to look your kids in the eye and have a conversation with them. Whatever you do as a family, I want you to develop a plan that is going to help you and your family be safer. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but whatever you do, your kids are looking for consistency. On our website, we have about 110 pages of free resources for you. There is a digital DNA kit there. You can log in there and it will help you walk through a process. You should know every password that your kid has. I gave you a tip earlier. If you decide it's okay for your kid to get this app because you've gone from this to big picture perspective, decided that's an app that will actually benefit their life and not harm them, then be with them when you sit down to set it up initially to make sure that privacy setting gets set to private right out of the gate and not public. You have access, parents, to your kids' devices 24/7, 365 because it is your device. I would recommend a contract. We have a free contract that you can use on our website. You can use it, change it, do whatever you want with it. But it's an agreement between you as the adult with your kid. Listen, if I as the adult break this on the contract, then here's the consequence. If you as the kid break it, here's your consequence. Here's one important one. No technology in any bedroom ever. Good things do not happen online in the dark, after dark. Start young. Hopefully some of you on here have little kids. Let me just tell you this, it's easier to teach this than to unteach it. But if you can't start early, then there's going to be a different communication strategy when they're older. I hear this all the time. I want to apply all the things you're talking about, but my kid's 16. It's going to be like starting World War III. So don't view it as you have to win the entire war. Pick a battle. So what a lot of parents have done is they'll do like a weekend with limited social media interaction, slowly beginning to cut back, gradually introducing new strategies, gradually helping them be better online. Pick your battle to win the war. And then please remember this for you as an adult, but also for your kids, you're only as safe online as your stupidest friend online. If you're like me, you've heard this a lot in your past. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Listen, we've got kids today and they've got 2,000 friends online. They don't know those people. Help our kids understand you don't know what's happening here. Unpacking all the things I've just walked through for you from the very start of this presentation, from the socially acceptable addictions we've gone through to the level of their demand is high. There are predators out there. There are people selling kids for sex. Why? Because there are sex buyers and we're vulnerable online to fall for their ploys. Help them understand that you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Know who they're talking to online. And all of it comes down to this. Apply these 3 words. It is always about the exploitation of vulnerability. The kid that you care about, their vulnerability may look nothing like the other kid. The kid you may care about may be struggling with their sexual identity and they're putting themselves all over online. Maybe they are a runner in the foster care system. Maybe some of you on here have adopted children. Maybe you're dealing with a kid who is in the foster care system and you got them temporarily. Maybe you got a kid and everything is great and perfect, but you're noticing, man, they just feel so lonely. They're isolated from their friends. Identify the vulnerability in your kid. It's all about the exploitation of vulnerability. And then finally, be alert. That's our strategy to where we need you and members of your community to be active in this effort. Continue learning, be empowered, be relentless, and do it together. Don't ever feel like you're alone in this, and please don't ever let our kids feel like they're alone. So one of the most practical steps that you can take is to engage with our organization and STAND. And we would encourage you through the Stop Trafficking Project to actually take the Be Alert pledge, where you would say, I will be active to help stop different forms of trafficking. I will commit to learning everything and all that I can. I will seek to empower others by what I've learned. And then I'm not going to give up. I'm going to be relentless in this battle. And I'm going to take a step further, and I'm going to help. We're going to work together in our community. We're going to work together to do what? To end it before it begins. And if you're really interested in taking that kind of a pledge, I would encourage you, if you want to grab right now, to grab your phones, or you can screenshot this or take a picture of it or write it down. But I would encourage you to just text the word Be Alert to 833-321-0219 and join this growing team of what we call Be Alert strategists throughout the state of Kansas and Missouri, as we continue to build groups of adults that are saying we will actually stand up for our kids. We're going to do anything, everything we can to address the exploitation of vulnerability so we can stand up and help our kids understand that they're not alone. And together by doing that, we really truly feel like we can end it before it begins. On our website, there's all kinds of free resources. I told you about 110 pages. There's a ton of videos on our website as well. All those are free for you that you can access there. And a great place to start is by taking the Be Alert pledge. You'll get a message back. Remember that standard message and data rates may apply, and you will join a team that is helping. So we've got about 5 minutes left for questions. I promise leave time for questions. So I will let Ricky take over, and I think she can probably talk to you about some specific local resources that they have through STAND. And I trust this has been beneficial, and I'm grateful for all of you for your time. So Ricky, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for all of that. I know I've seen your presentation several times and I get something new every single time because it's just so much great information. So thank you, Russ. And I know that people are very much appreciative of it. I am also going to briefly just introduce Dawn Day. She is the chair of Stand Against Trafficking, so I'm going to add her as a presenter here. And there's only one question that I'm seeing, and that was just for the name of the video. I'm assuming that's what's on your website. Is that correct, Russ?
Yeah, we showed a handful of videos of them. I wonder if they're referring to the Bark video, but all the videos that I just showed, they're on our website. And except for I think the short one that was the girl where the guy and the girl are finishing other sentences, but that one is also easily available online as well. So there's an actual video page on the website, and so the Bark video, which they're probably asking about, that entire video is on our website as well.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. And if anyone else has other questions, I'll just remind you that there's a chat feature on your side panel. If you click on that side panel of your webinar, you can go ahead and ask questions if you have any. I know that we just have a minute or two left. Dawn, so as the chair of Stand Against Trafficking, I know you wanted to just say a couple things and say hello. So go right ahead while we wait for any other questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Russ. We greatly appreciate you being here. And I learn something from you every time I hear you speak as well. It's fantastic, and we greatly appreciate the support. This is very important to have this concept happen in January, as January is National Trafficking Awareness Month. We all want to be more aware of what's going on, and I hope that everyone sends a Be Alert text to that phone number so they can get involved on a state level, but everyone can also go to our website, get more information there, and follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram, and we will share news articles and education opportunities and more information locally on those avenues as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's all that I see coming in now, but Russ, I know that your content and on your website is fantastic. I've been there. There's lots of great things there, as well as if you do need anything, please reach out to Stand Against Trafficking, whether through our website, standagainsttrafficking.org, or through our Gmail, which is standagainsttrafficking417@gmail.com. You can send us an email anytime, and then of course contact us on our socials as well. Getting a couple notes of how great this was and how thankful they are, Russ, for your information. So we really appreciate it, and we will go ahead and end the webinar now, but thanks so much for attending, and we hope that you all do get involved. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.